The Shitty Archives is a continuation of Episode 1 of the Magnus Archives, written by AI. It does start abruptly, but you'll get the hang of it. Statement begins. I gathered my belongings, grabbed my wallet, and headed towards the mouth of the alley. I realize now that I hadn't made the decision to move fast. Before I'd even reached the bottom of the step, the man was gone, having taken the stairs before I could reach them. I spun around, confused and scared. There was nothing there. There was a sound from behind me. So quiet at first, I didn't even know it was there. It was a wheeze, a snort of air, like the animal that it was, then a snuffle. The sound of something breathing. I spun around again to face the voice, but it had been snuffed out, and only a single breath remained. I was about to return to the alleyway, grab my things and run, when there was a click from behind me. A quick and all too silent crackle of electricity. "Think you can light this?" it said. A raspy croak that sounded like a stranger that knew you and had been drinking since you'd met. I turned, expecting to see an ugly, cackling maw of hellspawn, but no such creature was there. There was an electric zap that ignited my nerves, a crackle of static, and then I was looking at a bank of dimmed bulbs. As I stood there, my cigarette dangled from my lips. I could see the base was a twisted mass of wires, and with a few quick flicks the bulbs came on. In front of me was an old, ugly, oversized television set. One of those big ones with the big white CRT screen. Even though it was 3/4 dark, I could make out a few figures on the screen. I'd been so close at the time I could have reached out and touched them, though I was sure at the time that if I had, I probably would have gone up in flames. There were 3 men, 2 women, and a child. All of them were naked, blood streaming down their faces from their dismembered limbs. Blood was splattered all over the back wall of the room where the old woman was laid out, entrails trailing out of her belly, eyes wide open, horror written across her dead face. The 2 other were dead, headless, but stretched out. Their limbs twisted and bent as if by some unknown force. The television set had clearly been there since the time, and despite its disfigurement was still working. I just stared in horror at the scene, unable to process what I was seeing. When the television was on, I thought it would stop the voices that had been drifting through the alley, but I was wrong. A sound ripped through the silence, a sort of swoosh, like a great wind had swept through the alleyway, then another and another, until the sound of the television and their speech ceased. I stood there for a moment, dumbfounded. The alley was empty and the voices seemed to have disappeared. But for some reason, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the dead bodies. I looked around once more, confused. I hadn't heard any movement since I'd stepped into the alley. "You're next," the man yelled, but he sounded far away. I heard a shuffling in the alley. Something else was there. As I turned, I saw them. The creatures were dead. They weren't animated corpses. They were dead. There was no blood, no gore, just forms that were frozen in place. Chests that didn't rise or fall, jaws that were slack and unmoving, limbs that were hanging limply by their sides, faces that were frozen in a permanent sneer. The dead bodies were frozen in place as I watched, shivering slightly in the winter's chill, and for a moment I didn't realize what was happening. Then, suddenly, they were all in motion, crawling toward me on their elbows, almost drunkenly, and I stumbled back in fright. "Where are you going?" the man said in a cruel, amused tone. "The fun isn't over." I turned to run, but as I did, the 2 of them crashed into me. One grabbed my arm, the other my throat. both ripped at me, clawing at my face, ripping chunks of flesh off my face and arms. I kicked, I bit, I screamed, but they held me still. It was when I felt a stinging sensation in the back of my head, like a bee had stung me. It only lasted a second, and then there was nothing but blackness. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. When I came to, I was lying on a small bed in a tiny little room that felt like it was in the back of a house. To my right was a window, small and high enough that I couldn't see outside. When I turned my head, I saw that there was light out there. My head pounded, so I lifted it up and let it drop again. The two things it hit were as thick as fingers. But even though they hurt, it was nothing compared to the dull pain throbbing in the back of my head. I tried to turn over, but couldn't move my neck. I grabbed at it, hoping that by some miracle I would be able to stretch it enough to turn around. But no luck. Pulled at my arm, tried to wiggle my toes, but they were pinned in place. Nothing made sense, everything hurt, and I knew what was wrong. I couldn't move my neck, not even a millimeter. I knew, paralyzed. I just needed to sleep. I found a small pillow under my head and fell asleep. When I woke up, I wasn't sure how long I had slept. It was still dark. The morning light was starting to stream in through the small window. As I opened my eyes, I felt myself suffocating, so I closed them again. The pain in my head was so intense that I wasn't sure I would be able to open my eyes again. But after a few moments, I managed it. And when I opened them again, I saw a figure leaning over me, staring down. I couldn't make out the features of her face. The room was so small and dirty, and she was silhouetted against the window behind her. "No," I screamed. But my throat was dry, and my voice came out as a choked croak. The figure stepped forward, and for a moment I thought she was going to touch me. I thrashed and bit at her, tried to draw blood, but she ignored me and grabbed the rag that was on the sink and pressed it against my face. I could feel the cool air on my skin, but it felt very wrong. Like something was covering my whole face. "That's better," the figure said in a creepy, distorted voice. "Let's see what colour your blood is now." I woke up with a start, breathing heavily. The room was dark, and I could hear a creak of the bed under me as I lay on my back. I'd been dreaming about the dead. But not like that, not that. "Red," I whispered. Suddenly the room was illuminated. The window, as I had feared, was a small, clear pane that allowed a small amount of light in. And in the center of the room was a woman staring down at me, a pale blue light reflecting off the metal of her utility belt. "Hello," she said. I was suddenly filled with a cold fear. Why was this woman here, staring at me in this room? Was she friend or foe? What had happened to me? I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, I was trapped. The woman was looking at me curiously, not saying a word. It took me a moment to realize what had happened. The injection. I remembered that the doctor had injected me with something. Was it a drug? Was it a virus? Why was I here? Had I done something wrong? "That's a really interesting colour," the woman said, taking a step closer to me. "How unusual. Red blood. What do you think your parents are like?" I felt the presence next to me. It was a man, tall and large. He was wearing some sort of security uniform, but there was something else about him. Something in his eyes. Was it a stare? Could he read minds? Was he going to kill me? The woman stepped back as he walked into the room. He took another step and leaned down to look me in the eyes. His face was an older one, but it was obvious that he was incredibly old. "What's your name?" he asked. "Dexter," I replied. "What's your name?" "Dexter," I said again. I realized the woman was staring at me. My eyes were closed. I could feel that same presence next to me again. "Tell me, Dexter, why did you come here?" I didn't know why. How would I answer him? How would I explain everything that had happened to me? I opened my eyes slowly, looking up at the man's face. His skin was gray and wrinkled, his hair thin and black, and his eyes dark, devoid of any emotion. It was as if he were wearing a mask, something that hid his entire face. I stuttered. I wanted to run, but I was too frozen to move. "Tell me, Dexter, please," the old man said, leaning forward again. "We only have a few hours together. Tell me why you are here." Statement ends. Well, at least for now. I shall update this statement weekly, as it is written by an AI. Goodbye for now.